The sharp vibration of my phone startled me awake, breaking the stillness of the early morning. The screen glowed in the darkness, the blue light casting eerie shadows on the walls of my Boston brownstone. It was 3:17 a.m., an odd hour for messages. I blinked the sleep from my eyes and reached for my phone, my fingers trembling slightly, though I wasn't sure why. The text was from Francis, my husband of 30 years, or at least, the man who had once been my husband. A part of me had expected this moment, yet seeing it in words made my stomach drop. Sold our Cape Cod beach house and transferred all our savings to start my new life with Jessica. Enjoy being homeless. LOL. Don't bother calling, changing my number tomorrow. My breath hitched as I read the words again, my heart hammering against my ribs. Was this really how 30 years of marriage ended? A text message, punctuated with LOL, like a joke at my expense. I set the phone down, inhaling deeply. I refused to let this moment break me. My name is Alice Mercer, and at 52 years old, I never imagined I'd be starting over from scratch, but I also never imagined that the man I had built a life with would betray me so cruelly, draining our accounts and running off with his 29-year-old personal trainer. And yet, deep down, I had suspected something was wrong for months. It had started last spring. Francis, who had always shrugged off my concerns about his health, suddenly became obsessed with fitness. He signed up at an exclusive gym, scheduling long training sessions with his personal trainer, Jessica. At first, I was happy for him. He was finally taking care of himself, but as the months passed, I noticed other changes, his disappearing acts, his short temper when I questioned his mounting credit card charges, the way he suddenly became protective of his phone. By summer, his training sessions had become daily, and he had lost 30 pounds. He also changed the passwords to our financial accounts, started taking business trips that oddly coincided with Jessica's Instagram posts from tropical locations, and began withdrawing large sums of cash in increments just under the bank's notification threshold. I had built a career as a hospital administrator, and if there was one thing I was good at, it was careful observation and strategic planning. Instead of confronting Francis, I started gathering evidence. The final confirmation came one evening when I arrived home early with a migraine. Lying in bed, I overheard a phone conversation drifting from his office. His voice was hushed, intimate, the way he had once spoken to me. Jessica, baby, it's all coming together. The beach house should sell fast. Alice has no clue. Once that money is in our account, I'll transfer everything offshore. By the time she figures it out, we'll be living the dream in Bali. My blood turned cold. He wasn't just leaving me, he was planning to leave me destitute. The next morning, I went straight to Diane, our family attorney, who listened carefully before giving me a single piece of advice. Document everything, do not let him see you coming. And so I did. I compiled a meticulous record, financial statements, bank transfers, phone logs. I hired a forensic accountant who uncovered the separate bank account Francis had opened. I found emails to a real estate agent about quietly listing our family's Cape Cod beach house. I even had a copy of the conversation he had with Jessica, thanks to a voice recorder app one had discreetly installed on the landline. 3 weeks ago, I presented everything to Judge Martinez. After reviewing the evidence, she granted an emergency asset protection order, freezing all our joint accounts and voiding any unauthorized transactions. Any attempt to transfer large sums would be flagged immediately. Now, sitting in my dimly lit bedroom, I picked up my phone and typed a simple reply to Francis. Check your account balance. I imagined him sprawled in a luxury villa, Jessica at his side, feeling smug. I could almost see the moment his expression shifted from satisfaction to pure panic as he opened his banking app and saw the truth. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed his name. Apparently, he hadn't changed his number yet. I let it ring a few times before answering, my voice calm. Good morning, Francis. I see you checked the accounts. What the hell did you do? His voice was laced with panic and fury. I protected what was mine, I replied evenly. And what belongs to our children? This is my money, he roared. You had no right. Our money, I corrected, and a judge agreed with me. The offshore account you set up, frozen. The beach house sale, cancelled. Your international transfers, flagged. Silence, then a muffled argument in the background, Jessica's voice, high-pitched and frantic. I smiled. Is that Jessica? You might want to explain to her that authorities have been alerted to potential tax evasion. Listen to me, Alice. No, Francis, you listen. There's an emergency hearing on Monday. You're required to attend. Your passport has been flagged, meaning you can leave Bali, but the moment you enter another country, you'll be detained." The silence stretched, thick with tension. Finally, he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "You won't get away with this." I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in months. I already have. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I shook my head slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me. "Not directly," I admitted, "but Michael thinks he'll have to come back soon, if only to try to defend himself in court." Across the table, Elise pushed her food around her plate without eating. She had always been the more emotional one between the two of us, and this situation was no exception. "I still can't believe he texted you like that. Enjoy being homeless. Who says that to someone after 30 years together?" she said, her voice tight with frustration. Michael, who had just entered the room carrying a thick stack of documents, answered matter-of-factly, "Someone who thought he had gotten away with it." He placed the papers on the table in front of me and sighed. "And speaking of which, we just received confirmation. Francis has booked a flight back to Boston. He'll be landing tomorrow evening." A mix of emotions washed over me at that moment. Relief, because he was finally returning to face the consequences of his actions. Anxiety, because I wasn't sure how seeing him again would make me feel. And, oddly, a sense of validation. Everything I had been working toward, every painful step I had taken, had led to this moment. My preparations had worked. Michael slid a document toward me. "He's also sent a formal statement through an attorney in Bali," he continued. "He claims the text was just a joke and that there was a misunderstanding about the listing for the beach house." "A joke?" Elisa's voice shot up an octave in disbelief. "After we saw all the evidence?" Francis's return to Boston played out like a carefully choreographed legal maneuver. Diane, my attorney, had arranged for a court officer to serve him the moment he cleared customs at Logan International Airport. Michael's colleague was stationed at the terminal, sending us live updates as events unfolded. As we sat in Diane's office, Michael checked his phone and gave us a play-by-play. "He just landed," he reported, "looks completely stunned. No sign of Jessica. The court officer is approaching now." I nodded, keeping my face neutral even as my heart pounded in my chest. I had been married to Francis for 3 decades, long enough to predict exactly how he would react. First, he would deny everything. Then, he would try to negotiate. When that failed, he would lash out in anger, and if that didn't work, he would resort to tearful pleas for forgiveness. Diane looked at me gently. "Alice, are you absolutely sure you want to be there at tomorrow's hearing? I can represent you fully. You don't have to see him if you don't want to." I took a deep breath. "I need to be there," I said firmly, "not for Francis, but for myself. I spent too many years making myself small, putting his needs and dreams ahead of my own. This time, I refuse to disappear." Elise reached across the table and squeezed my hand in silent support. Both of my children had insisted on being by my side, ensuring that I wouldn't have to face this alone. A couple of hours later, Diane received a call from Francis's newly hired attorney. They wanted an emergency meeting before the hearing, an 11th-hour attempt to settle. "They're offering a deal," Diane explained after hanging up. "Francis says he'll let you keep the beach house if you agree to drop the emergency orders and settle for a quiet, quick divorce." I let out a humorless laugh. "Let me keep it?" I repeated. "That house has been in my family for 4 generations. He has no right to it." Diane nodded. "It's not a serious offer. They're just trying to see what you're willing to accept. Then tell them we'll see them in court." Later that evening, just as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Francis's brother's number. I answered cautiously. "Hello? Alice, it's Michael," came the tense reply. "Francis is here with me. He wants to talk to you before tomorrow's hearing." I advised against it, but he's insisting. I hesitated for a moment, then steeled myself, put him on speaker. "But stay in the room, Michael." There was a brief pause before Francis's voice came through, rough and weary. "Alice, this has all gotten out of hand. I made a terrible mistake." "Which mistake exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Trying to steal our savings, listing my family's beach house for sale without telling me, or sending me a text telling me to enjoy being homeless?" He stammered, struggling for words. "I wasn't thinking clearly, Jessica. She made everything seem possible, a new life, a fresh start. But she's gone now. The moment she realized there was no money, she left." "What a shock," I said dryly. "I want to come home," he continued, his voice breaking. 30 years, Alice, doesn't that count for something? For a brief moment, I remembered the young man I had married, ambitious, full of dreams. We had built a life together, but that man was long gone. The one on the phone with me now was someone who had betrayed me without hesitation, who had tried to strip me of everything I had worked for. It did count for something, I said quietly. That's why I protected everything we built together, and that's why I'll see you in court tomorrow. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with my head held high. The large marble hallways echoed with footsteps as I sat beside Diane at the plaintiff's table. Thomas and Elise sat directly behind me, while Michael positioned himself between both parties, a silent reminder of his divided loyalties but ultimate commitment to the truth. Francis entered looking nothing like the confident, tanned man who had left for Bali. He was pale, disheveled, and visibly nervous. He tried to catch my eye, but I refused to look at him. Instead, I focused on Judge Martinez as she entered the courtroom. "We're here for the matter of Mercer versus Mercer," she stated, reviewing the paperwork. "I see that temporary asset protection orders were issued 3 weeks ago due to evidence of attempted fraud and financial abandonment." Francis's attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client believes there has been a misunderstanding." Judge Martinez cut him off. "I've reviewed the documentation. Unauthorized sale attempts, financial deceit, multiple violations of court orders. Let's not waste this court's time." 3 hours later, the judge delivered her ruling. The asset freeze would remain in place. Francis was found in contempt for trying to access frozen funds. A financial guardian was appointed to oversee our marital assets. And most importantly, I was granted exclusive rights to our Boston home and the beach house. As we left the courtroom, Francis approached me one last time. "Alice, please, where am I supposed to go?" I met his eyes for the first time. "That's something you should have thought about before telling me to enjoy being homeless. I'm sure you'll figure something out." And with that, I walked away, finally free.